have been paused?
I am, yes.
When were you made aware of that?
Well, I understood the decision was made a few minutes ago. It's something
Sitting
that's
here,
been under discussion.
sitting here, under discussion. So did you know that that this was under discussion, and why did you not include that as part of your opening remarks?
So typically what I don't do is divulge the contents of my discussions with
What are the
President
details of the
Congress.
pause?
Well, my understanding is that because so many countries have decided not to retaliate, we're going to have about 90 days.
No, excuse me? China increased their tariffs on the United States. Trump blinked.
What's the blink, sir?
What do you know about this pause? What are the details of it?
Well, the details, as I understand it, is that China continues to retaliate. Other countries didn't retaliate. The president 2 or 3 days ago said we wanted to negotiate with those countries that asked for meetings. That's what we're doing.
What are the
We've had
details?
discussions.
How long is the pause? How many days? How many weeks?
I understand it's 90 days. I haven't spoken to the president since I've
So
been
the
in this
trade
hearing.
representative hasn't spoken to the president of the United States about a global reordering of trade.
Yes, I have. I've
And
just
yet
been in the hearing with you, sir.
But yet he announced it on a tweet. WTF? Who's in charge?
The president of the United States is in charge.
And what do you know about those details?
Well, as I mentioned,
It looks like your boss just pulled the rug out from under you and paused the tariffs, the taxes on the American people. There's no strategy. You just found out 3 seconds ago, sitting here, we saw you.
we've been discussing a
If
variety
you
of
came
these
here
actions.
knowing that you were going to be turned off, that these tariffs were going to be turned off, why didn't you include that in your opening statement? Why didn't you reference that as part of your testimony?
Well, I don't disclose my conversations with the president, sir.
These were specific questions we asked you all along. What's the strategy? These are real consequences for the American people and small businesses. I had a group of small businesses in my office earlier today talking about the impacts of these tariffs on aluminum and steel. This is amateur hour, and it needs to stop. What does this even mean for your negotiating strategy? How are you in charge of negotiation if the president is tweeting about this from wherever the hell he is?
The president was elected, and he runs the trade policy, and I advise him and execute his trade
Who
policy.
executes the trade policy?
I execute the trade
Did you
policy
know
with the president.
that this was happening?
We have been discussing all kinds of
And there's another
options.
member of the cabinet, Besant, who just canceled coming to the Hill to avoid talking about the market because it's in turmoil. This in just days because there was no strategy, there was no plan. The president chose to take actions that he didn't even have the authority to take. He's put our economy in disarray and near collapse. We have small businesses and Americans who are concerned about their well-being, people's retirement, people's 529 accounts went down because of this administration. We have people that are planning to send their kids to college this fall. People who are retiring whose benefits have declined. Is this market manipulation?
No.
Why not? If it was a plan, if it was always the plan, how is this not market manipulation?
It's not market manipulation, sir.
Well, then what is it? Because it sure is not a strategy.
We're trying to reset the global trade system.
You're-
That's
and-
offshored,
and what-
offshored
and-
all of our
and
factories.
what has that
and
done?
offshored all of
How
our
have you
jobs.
done? How have you achieved any of that? But to enact enormous harm on the American people, which was our concern from the very beginning. Tariffs are a tool. It can be used in the appropriate way to protect U.S. jobs and small businesses. But that's not what this does. So if it's not market manipulation, what is it? Who's benefiting? What billionaire just got richer? And all the while, there are not even any Republicans left in this hearing. They all left because they don't even want to defend this. But meanwhile, the speaker is rushing to the floor to pass a budget reconciliation to screw America by passing the biggest tax cut in history on the backs of the American people. WTF? Who's in charge? Because it sure doesn't look like it's the trade representative. You just got the rug pulled out from under you. I wish I could feel some empathy, but the empathy I have is for the American people whose very well-being and livelihoods are being affected. This is not a game. This is real life. I yield back.
Let the record reflect that there's more Republicans in this chamber than there are Democrats currently in this committee room. There's 6 of us, there's 5 of you. So let's make sure we get the facts right. I appreciate the president did not blink on China, as was said earlier, and it needs to be corrected in the record. In fact, he increased China by 125%.
Would you yield, Mr. Chairman?
I do not.
Can we have a colloquy?
No.
We don't want to talk about the trade policy here in the Trade Committee. This is our jurisdiction.
Your time has expired, and I'm more than happy to talk to you.
I asked if you would yield.
And I said no.
Because you don't want to defend the policy or the strategy. Kick me out. What you gonna do? Kick me out of
Mr. Yocum, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ambassador Greer, it's good to see you today. As we discussed in the past, Indiana's 2nd District has the type of production economy that he would like to make for the entire country. We manufacture 85% of the nation's RVs, 60% of artificial knees and hips, as well as boats, trailers, buses, auto parts, Humvees, you name it. We also have a ton of ag in my district: corn, soybeans, eggs, dairy, ducks, beef, pork, lumber, potatoes, and tomatoes. I could go on. Lumber alone, I was actually just meeting with a cabinet manufacturer here a few minutes ago. I couldn't even remember if I had been to that cabinet manufacturer's site because we have so many of them in my district. I don't know how we do all that in one area, but somehow we do. All this to say, supply chains matter, both getting inputs in the door and outputs out to market. Small hang-ups can create expensive backups. A drip of price hikes can turn into a stream, and that stream can turn into a river for something with thousands of components. I hope we can get some good deals quickly. It probably won't come as a surprise to you, Mr. Ambassador, when I tell you that when an RV or boat is exported, it tends to not go very far. In fact, 90% of RV exports are to Canada. However, Canadian retaliation tariffs against RVs begin today, and boats are on the bubble. Are you consulting with industries and companies being targeted by these retaliatory tariffs?
So, Congressman, in many cases, yes. I understand that the retaliatory tariffs by Canada are related to the steel and aluminum tariffs. And so that would be the Commerce Department. But we meet with all these folks, right? Whether it's covered by the Commerce Department or someone else, they want a meeting, we take it, we listen, and we provide the feedback that's necessary. You know, and obviously we're talking to all of these countries to get to a position where we have better terms of trade with them, where we can ensure that we have domestic steel and aluminum manufacturing and the other critical sectors that are so important to our economy.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I also want to get your thoughts on a recent New York Times article titled "The Tsunami is Coming." China's global exports are just getting started. It reports that Chinese state-controlled banks lent an extra $1.9 trillion to industrial borrowers over the last 4 years. But all those factories aren't just churning out gizmos and gadgets destined for their domestic consumption. China's promised shift to a consumption economy remains just that, a promise. Increased production paired with low consumption just means that China continues to double down on overcapacity. And these numbers bear that out. Exports rose 13% in 2023 and 17% in 2024. It seems like there's a global recognition that the threat posed by China's overcapacity is real. The EU, Brazil, Indonesia, Thailand, and others have also imposed tariffs on China to counter the flood of cheap exports. It's not just us. Reports suggest that Canada and Mexico are open to coordinating with the United States on China's overcapacity. Are you able to comment, Mr. Ambassador, on reports that Canada and Mexico are open to coordination on Chinese overcapacity? And if they were to coordinate with us, would that potentially create an off-ramp for Canada and Mexico on the U.S. tariffs?
So in the first instance, I appreciate you highlighting that. And overcapacity in China, it infects the whole world, right? It can displace products in third countries that come to us indirectly. And that's often why we do a global tariff action, because the Chinese actions are not just bilateral. They cause a problem for the whole economy. And so we have to take global actions to make sure there aren't loopholes or Swiss cheese. With respect to Canada and Mexico, I won't get into the details of our negotiations with them. I'll defer to their public statements. But for my part, I would say we have encouraged, we being American policymakers, we have encouraged for years our close trading partners to take stronger action against China of the types of actions that we are taking.
Right. What about other countries and allies? Do you think there's room for them to coordinate with us on some of these tariffs as it relates to China?
So I think there's room for that. Some of these economies are closer geopolitically and economically to China. It makes it a harder choice for them, Southeast Asia, that kind of thing. But in my own view, it's in these countries' own interest to, frankly, manage their trade with China so that they don't become victims of a second China shock.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for being here today. I'd also like to thank you for your patience that you've certainly shown with us today. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ambassador, it's good to see you in a different capacity. I remember
see
last
you as
time
well.
we were together in the last administration, I was seeing you for a visit, but it's good to see you and welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ambassador Greer, for your time and testimony today. From day one, this administration made it clear through his America First economic agenda that the United States will no longer tolerate unfair trade practices or accept the chronic trade deficits that have hurt American workers and industries for far too long. The farmers and manufacturers I represent depend on strong, enforceable trade agreements that ensure their crops and products can compete and thrive in global markets. They are not asking for special treatment, only a level playing field. As you noted in your testimony, under the Biden administration, we saw consecutive years of agricultural trade deficits, a deeply concerning trend that reflects a broader lack of urgency to fight for American farmers, empower our workers, and focus on advancing U.S. economic interests abroad. Additionally, the prior U.S. trade representatives' retreat from efforts to negotiate critical market access from the American leadership in digital trade has created a dangerous vacuum, one that China and other adversaries are incredibly eager to fill. Without a clear, assertive economic strategy, we risk losing ground not just in agriculture or manufacturing, but also in innovation, technology, and long-term economic security. Now is the time to advance a bold, pro-growth trade policy that restores American leadership, defends our producers, and sets the terms of tomorrow's economy. Ambassador Greer, as you know, there are certain goods critical to supporting the United States manufacturers and consumers that are either not readily available in sufficient capacity or cannot be produced at all domestically due to geographic and climate limitations. Coffee and cacao are clear examples where small-scale production exists in places like Puerto Rico and Hawaii. However, this production comes nowhere near meeting domestic demand within our country. Given their importance to both consumers and domestic food manufacturers, could you please speak to how the administration is working with industry stakeholders and international trading partners to maintain secure, reliable access to these essential imports?
Certainly. First of all, I appreciate your comments and pointing out this, because the global economy is complex. Among some of the countries that I have coming in to speak, I'm meeting, for example, with Madagascar within the next day or two. And as has been mentioned here, vanilla is sourced from Madagascar, among other things. So we're certainly engaging in conversations with those countries, including those who have some of those things that cannot necessarily be grown here. So that's certainly part of it. We're sensitive to those needs. And again, I've mentioned this before with respect to U.S., Canada, and Mexico, where we have a lot of components and parts that may come across. That's currently not subject to a duty if they comply with the rules.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. In your comments yesterday to my colleagues in the Senate, you mentioned that roughly 50 countries have reached out in recent days to negotiate with this administration's following last week's trade action. I'm particularly interested in the engagement with countries of the Indo-Pacific and Africa, where many American businesses compete with companies subsidized by the Chinese Communist Party. Among the countries that have reached out, how's the administration considering these unique challenges while ensuring critical market access for advancing U.S. economic and strategic interests?
So for example, you mentioned Southeast Asia. Some of the things we've seen Cambodia and Vietnam, for example, come forward and say that they want to engage in reciprocal trade. You know, they've made certain proposals on lowering tariff levels. I think that, you know, it can be challenging because they do have Chinese businesses operating there too. So I think if you're going to get to a situation where you're having to deal with some of these folks, you know, one, you want to make sure it's real market access they're giving you, not just tariff levels, but also the non-tariff barriers. And you also want to make sure you're not giving a benefit to Chinese companies operating in those countries, right? We don't want some deal with them only to have it become Chinese companies, you know, pushing product to the United States through Vietnam or Cambodia. So that's something we're looking at in terms of rules of origin, et cetera.
Well, thank you very much for your attention to detail on this matter. It's big in our district, and so that's why I bring it up, and thank you for your answer. And if I may, and you know, it's a little bit of a tough one, but on what timeline do you expect these negotiations to move, and the outcome, what should we be watching for as the trade commitments from our partners across the globe?
Certainly. Well, before the action even went into place, trading partners knew action was coming, right? They heard the president, as everyone had, and so they came in advance to talk about you know, possibilities where they could have more reciprocal trade with us. This afternoon, I have additional meetings. You know, I'm working with other members of the cabinet to make sure we can you know, work with these folks, understand where they're coming down, what their offers might be, and this is job one for the next few weeks and months.
Well, Ambassador, I just want to thank you very much for your hard work, your dedication to this country, and the service that you're doing as ambassador. And just checking here, seeing as some of the tariffs that the president is doing have already adjusted a bit. The market's up 2,300. So I know it's in the beginning of the administration, but I feel very confident about your direction and leadership moving through with these negotiations. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you.
Ms. Plaskett.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. Ambassador, good afternoon. I had quite a number of questions about tariffs, but since that's on pause, I'm going to pause on those questions and deal with one that is more specific to my district and one that I'm concerned with, and that's regarding a proposed rule that you have that has been put out, and I know that there have been testimony about it. In the U.S. Virgin Islands and throughout the Caribbean, as well as some of the other territories, in Hawaii, we import virtually everything needed for daily life, from food products, poultry, groceries, vehicles, etc. 97% of the food that's consumed in my district comes from imported goods. I'm deeply concerned about the impact of trade actions, particularly because it seems very apparent that I don't know if the American territories have been thoroughly thought through and the impact this will have on us in some of these tariffs as well as some of the proposed rules. Proposed action taken under the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, Section 301, authority, right now does not provide a balanced solution, particularly when it comes to American businesses and jobs in the shipbuilding capacity. We know that you've proposed a rule to to impose fees on those ships which are not made, that are Chinese made, that are not American made. However, a large portion of ships which are much smaller than those that are made in American ports, the American ports are predominantly making those for the military purposes. It's cost effective for them to do it for the military, but not for those kinds of cargo shipping that's done in the Caribbean region. It doesn't provide a balance for us, and we are concerned not only in the Virgin Islands, but Puerto Rico, as well as the other Caribbean islands, that this imposition of $1 million per port that is being proposed will bear incredible impact on us. U.S. shipping industry serving the Caribbean cannot absorb additional costs of the proposed port fees, which would have a significant economic consequence to us. I have the median income, family income in the Virgin Islands is $30,000 a year. The cost of $1 million per port is going to be passed on to the consumers in my district, to the business owners. We are about to start a rebuilding of 20 schools, 2 hospitals, a complete microgrid, complete utility rebuilding both in the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. All of the laying and supplies that are coming into us are coming from these type of vessels. If they are then going to be imposed this fee, we will, negotiations that have already been done with FEMA for the cost of rebuilding are going to skyrocket. And we need some support for that. The thought is, sir, is many of these shipbuilders are in fact American-owned. They're American shipping vessels that are American-owned. They are just Chinese-made. Has there been discussion about having some exemption for American-owned, American vessels that are coming out of Florida, going into the Caribbean? I have a chart up here. 92 billion has come from the Caribbean into are imported from the United States. The Caribbean region, which only has 80 million people, is the fourth greatest trade partner with the United States. Have you thought about exemptions for those individuals who are in there?
Thank you for your thoughtful comments and feedback. We've also heard from other territories that have expressed similar concerns, and so we've had a process going on with hearings and collecting comments, and this is certainly something that we take on board. I think it's very important. We have two things we're trying to thread here, right? One is the Chinese make all the ships mostly, besides Japanese and Koreans, and we don't make any ships, and so we need to change the incentives there. But then we have the issue you're talking about is, we're not going to make 25 ships on April 18th, the day after we put in any kind of measure. So I certainly think that there has to be accommodation made for circumstances, because we're not going to have all the ships on April 18th. So this is helpful to me. No decision has been finalized yet.
I would also put this out. The other concern is one that has been mentioned by my colleagues as well, is national security. We cannot have Caribbean nations moving closer to China, who is already on the shores of these Caribbean nations, to try and do increased trade with them. If we are having a trade war with China, if we want to ensure that America is first, America needs to be first in its third border, which is the Caribbean. That was said by President George W. Bush. That is the third border. That is what we need to secure, and we're not going to do it if we are pushing American shipping companies outside of the Caribbean, and they have to go to China to do that. So I want to thank you for your consideration of this.
Thank you.
Mr. Bean.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. A very good afternoon to you, and good afternoon, Ways and Means Committee, and a special welcome to our special guest, Ambassador Greer. Thank you so much. As I look at the clock, you have sat in the hot seat for 4 hours. And the hot seat has gotten hot. I know it's gotten hot. It's gotten hot because you and this president, President Trump, have chosen to not ignore a problem anymore. It would be so easy just to ignore it. It would be so easy to ignore our collapsing manufacturing base. It would be so easy to just ignore that we're subsidizing the rest of the globe right now, but it's not how you roll. It's not how this president rolls. We're determined to make things better. The problem is, as you know this already, since 1994, we've lost 5 million manufacturing jobs, 90,000, I'm looking at a camera somewhere. I want the American people to know what's at stake. 90,000 manufacturing plants have closed. You have said enough. You have said enough. This President Trump said, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to leave it better than I found it. And for our kids and grandkids, no more. Ambassador Greer, can you tell the American people what's going to happen if you just ignored it? If we just ignored it, how long? Is it unsustainable? If we just ignored the problem, what happens to our economy?
Now, thank you for your comments. I agree completely with you. The situation is, for the past 30 years or so, we have had a trade policy dictated by Wall Street, and that's what I have people screaming at me today, the Wall Street talking points, repeating everything. They're trying to tell me what Goldman Sachs thinks. They're telling me all these different kinds of things. We're not talking about the next quarterly earnings for the investors on Wall Street, right? When the Wall Street Journal says, oh, well, this is going to be bad for Wall Street, I'm kind of focused on Main Street. I'm focused on getting these jobs back. We're sensitive to volatility in the market. We're sensitive to this. The problem is there's not a silver bullet where we can magically, have everything, bright and shiny again immediately. But we have to take strong measures. I would love to have Congress also take strong measures to help with reshoring and to support during this transition where we adjust from an economy that's fueled by government spending and over-financialization to one where we're making real goods and services. Because if we don't do it, Congressman, if we don't do it, then we will be dependent completely on others, including our foreign adversaries, for the things we need the most.
Amen.
Cars,
Like drugs and manufacturing, 50% of which comes from our adversary China, which is a shame. It's working. It is working, and I want the American people to know there are dozens of companies that said, "Hey, we're going to come back. We're going to invest in America." Apple, OpenAI, Oracle, SoftBank, Johnson & Johnson, thousands of jobs, billions and billions of money. So it is working, and I do know as a tweet right now, we've got over 70 countries that said, "America, we want to work with you. We're going to eliminate tariffs." So it is working, and my phone just went off that the president just recently said we're going to call timeout on a 60-day pause on every nation except China. That's breaking news, Mr. Ambassador. So, which is really good. I want us to be sensitive, though, and I've heard from manufacturings, too, in my area alone, growing wood, said, "Amen, finally, we can't have Brazil and Canada dumping wood." The seafood industry, which is big in Florida also, China, shrimp comes from China enough. What about companies that ordered product before the tariffs, before Liberation Day? Are we going to recognize the Custom and Border Protection have put arbitrary dates? I just want to get that on the record, and hopefully you and your team will recognize that. Is that something that's on your radar screen of when they've ordered it before, are they still going to be able to comply with some deadlines?
So I know normally what happens when you take a tariff action, if there are goods on the water, en route, that's something where it's not going to be subject to a tariff. I think we have a little bit of a pause right now as we're negotiating with countries, and we can take a look at that.
10-4, and just and then coordinating with customs. Your team has given me the thumbs up that I just want to put that on the record. How are we going to compete when countries like China that are subsidized in foreign governments, how are we going to make sure the American worker can compete against them? Is that on your radar screen?
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I mean, as we're looking at these other countries, I mentioned this a little earlier, maybe it was to Congressman Miller, if we're getting to a situation where we actually have a deal for better reciprocal trade with other countries, I want to make sure that it's a benefit to us and that country. I don't want a third country like China benefiting from it.
Amen. Mr. Ambassador, on behalf of people in Florida, Northeast Florida, thank you for standing up for the American worker finally. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you.
Mr. Swazi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ambassador. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for your service. I saw that you were a missionary and you were a veteran and you had a big job at a law firm, and now you're here serving the government. You helped negotiate the USMCA. Did you think the USMCA was a good deal for America?
I think it was. There was a lot more we could have done and should have done.
So why did the president come out after this year and say it was one of the worst deals we ever negotiated in the history of the country?
I think it's frustrating that here we are 5 years later and steel imports from Mexico shot up, car imports from Mexico shot up.
Well, you think it was a good deal, but he thinks it was a terrible deal. I mean, I feel like you're in a very bad position here. This whole idea that this president made this switcheroo on you while you were in the middle of testifying here today. I actually feel bad for you.
No,
but I really feel bad for the American people that are seeing these things happen. There's no plan. I mean, that's my big concern. I know there's goals. I want to see manufacturing brought back to America, or at least I want to see jobs that pay more money so we can rebuild our middle class in America. I'm for that. I'm for holding China accountable and holding our adversaries accountable. I'm for tariffs in select specific places. But right now, all we know is prices are going up, we're pissing off our allies, and the stock market went down dramatically. It's gone up dramatically today. The market manipulation question by Mr. Horsford is a very real concern that we're going to have to dig into a little bit. Who's benefiting from these wild fluctuations down, wild fluctuation up? We're still way down. We need a plan to accomplish the objectives that I know that you genuinely believe in, which is to try and recreate the middle class here in the United States of America, that on my side of the aisle, we all believe in that. We have to recreate the middle class in America. Do you think we should increase the minimum wage in America?
I think we need to create jobs that naturally have high wages.
The minimum wage in 20 states is $7.25 an hour. Do you think we should increase the minimum wage?
I mean, I think the states should be managing that kind of thing. I think we need better manufacturing
So
jobs that are
20 states,
$30, $40, $50
20 states
an
rely
hour.
on the federal minimum wage. It's still $7.25 an hour. So you don't think we should increase it at the federal level?
Well, you'll have to talk to the Secretary of Labor on that. That's
Do you think
way
we should
outside
have
my
the
wheelhouse.
PRO Act to promote unions in America? Because that will help to recreate the middle class.
And I'd refer you to Secretary Chavez de Remer. She's much better placed.
Do you like the CHIPS Act that to reshore the manufacturing of semiconductors here in the United States of America, a national industrial policy where we invest in creating factories with high-skilled, high-wage jobs in America? Do you support the CHIPS Act?
So notionally, I agree that we should have industrial policy to help with chips and other things, right? You know, whether the CHIPS Act was the perfect way to do it, I don't know. But
So
I
my
believe
big
in industrial
concern is that, you know, we want to do these things. You and I share the same goals, but there's no plan right now. As we saw, there's been devastation from this unilateral action by the president where he treats our allies and our strategic adversaries the same, with the exception of China. We know that China's, and I'm all for that. I actually have a bill that I've sponsored to get rid of most favored trade nation for China. So, but why are we treating our allies? Why are we treating Japan and Korea and Australia, who have been our bulwarks against China in the Indo-Pacific? And Vietnam, even though they don't share our philosophy, they're sick of China as well. And we were building a relationship with them to help us be a bulwark against China. Why are we treating our allies in the Indo-Pacific, who are our main allies against China, the same as we're treating our adversaries?
We aren't treating them the same. They have substantially lower tariffs than
I
China.
know, but we just kind of, we
Substantially.
really
They're
kind of
completely different.
bombarded them. I mean, it's the same as USMCA. We negotiated a bipartisan trade agreement that everybody agreed upon, that the president praised as being the best deal ever, and now he pulls the rug, like he pulled the rugs out from under you today. He pulled the rug out from under Canada and Mexico. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's no plan. Do you think that there's a plan, and can you share the plan with us?
Certainly. Listen, I'm very confident in the president's policy. Goods that meet USMCA rules come in duty-free. So when the president comes out and he says we're going to have a tariff to make sure we're treated the same, that we can get rid of these deficits, we have a baseline 10% to make sure that we don't have Swiss cheese in this program, and then we have higher tariffs on those who are the worst offenders. That's why you end up in a situation.
The president put in place the president put in place these high tariffs, but today he just yanked them out. Is that part of the plan? Was that always part of the plan?
Well, they're paused. The reality is, a lot of these countries have come to us and they said, we understand American leadership, we understand what you're trying to do, we want to have reciprocal trade with you. China has taken a different choice, and so they're on a different path. Our Western Hemisphere countries, they all have the lowest rate. They have a 10% rate, right? The UK, Australia, they have a 10% rate. These are all the lowest. The big issues are in Asia, where we saw the offshoring, and China is in a category all by itself.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador. Appreciate your time today. I'm very concerned there's no plan, and this is being done kind of willy-nilly at the last minute by the president, out of his head. It doesn't really make sense to us. It'd be great if we knew what the plan was and it was shared to us by the administration, and even if it was done in a way for our committee, that we can at least know what's happening. We have a lot of the same goals, but right now, prices are going up, our allies are very upset, and the stock market is on fire. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Gomez is recognized to enter and document